Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Auto Lab. Thank you so much for joining us. We're all about everything automotive. If you love cars, so do we. That's why we're here, and hopefully that's why you're here as well. I'm Ian Carr. We've got a fantastic show lined up for you today, an amazing car artist that you're going to meet. You've seen the work everywhere. You're going to learn a lot more about this talented designer. And we've also, of course, got our dream team of experts with us this morning. Holder of 61 ACE certifications, we've got Mike Porcelli. Good morning, Mike.
Yes, good morning, Ian. Happy 4th of July, everybody.
Happy 4th of July. Our resident historian, Alex Sultanas, is with us again today. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning to the AACA listeners out there.
And of course, our automotive journalist and expert from across the pond, Robert Erskine. Good morning, Robert.
Hi, very good morning to you from a warm, muggy and damp Suffolk, England.
Did you say Suffolk?
Suffolk.
It's stuffy?
Yes.
It's
Stuffy.
Suffolk, England now.
Suffolk, England. Very Suffolky here today.
All right. Well,
it's the new word for the
it's very
lesson.
nice. It's very nice to be connected across the pond.
It is.
So thanks very much. So let's get things underway right away with a very special guest that I believe Alex is going to introduce for us.
Yes, today's guest is an automotive commission artist whose work has been seen in Hemmings Motor News, Hemmings Muscle Machines, Garage Style magazine, and now graces the cover on a very special magazine, which he will be telling us all about. His work has been in the AACA Museum, the Elegance at Hershey, and he has even been the master of ceremonies at the second annual Cigar City Concours d'Elegance in Tampa, Florida. I welcome Mr. Joe Pep to the show. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning,
Joe Pep.
everybody.
Welcome, Joe Pep.
Good morning.
Great to see you.
Yeah. So
All I have to say is, kids, draw on those kitchen walls. You never know where it comes from.
Go ahead and draw.
Oh man.
Especially
Joe,
Archie comics.
Yeah, Joe is an awesome guy. Hey, Joe, when did you first get into classic cars?
Well, my grandfather worked for International Motor Car Company, which later became Mack Truck. And he always told me about his friends that have old cars. We would go for rides. He'd say, "Hey, Peppy, look, there's trolley car tracks." Or we'd stop off at a friend's house he hadn't seen in years, and they'd go and open up the old garage, and it'd have like an old Studebaker or an old Chevy under a tarp. But where I really got into it was in 1959. I was 5. And that's when Elliot Ness and the Untouchables came out.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing these my grandfather used to call them old time cars. Back then there was no car shows or classic cars. And my grandfather says, "This show has all these old time cars." And you got to figure in 1959, the cars that they were showing had to be 25 years old. And that's where I really fell in love with it. In 1965, Dad had taken me to the New York World's Fair. And that's where I first saw a concept car.
Mm-hmm.
I was blown away. I was just blown away. And my dad, he was always one for saying, he says, "Pep, one day you may be driving something like that." So, for a 10-year-old kid, that was like, wow, this is fantastic. And that's how my passion for automobiles started.
Yeah. I remember the World's Fair too. It was. I remember just being awestruck at everything. It's funny what sticks in your mind, right?
Bigger than life. Bigger than life.
And that was my own neighborhood. I was in Whitestone at the time. Your first art job, I should say, was in advertising. Is that correct?
Right. Around a total of 45 years in advertising and publishing. I worked for one of the top 5 typography shops in Manhattan. So I got to meet all these famous graphic designers that used our service. One man, which probably nobody knows in the automotive world, his name's Paul Rand. He designed the IBM logo, UPS, TWA. and I had the honor of working with him. And I always thought, it's like, wow, here's a kid with a 2-year county college degree, and I'm working with like one of the all-time greats. But it was like a wonderful education, which I use to this day when I do event posters. It's like the type has to go with the poster for that time period. I got to tell you about the hat. I was tired of going to car shows. And when I lived in Connecticut, we had the Fairfield County Concours Elegance, which was in Westport, Connecticut, and the Greenwich Concours. And I was tired of going to car shows and getting burnt ears and a burnt nose. And I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he says, well, there's this great hat shop up in New Haven, Connecticut called Delmonico's. And so in the spring of 2009, got one. And then I get a call from Mark McCourt from Hemmings. And he says that Richard Lenateno and myself, we would love to have you in our magazine. So this hat's become like a trademark. So people say, when I go to a car show, I'll look for the hat. So I'm easy to spot. So now I have this hat, and it's been with me. This is my second one. The first one lasted 10 years. So Robert, this quality haberdashery.
Love it.
And it's stuck with me, so I always wear the hat.
You mentioned Hemmings and Richard Lentinello. When did you first get your first break with doing automobile art? I think that was with them guys, right?
Right. Well, I started off, so I'm working in advertising, and I'm working as an art director at Archie Comics. So all my art is done in Adobe Illustrator. Now, I'm a digital artist. Never really had time to take classes because it was earning a living, and never had time to, oil paint or watercolor. And then, you have babies coming back in the 90s. So it's like, well, that's impossible. And so I always stuck with it. But Richard Lenateno gave me a break in the October issue of Hemmings Classic Car. And then that was featured in a blog. And over the years, I've been mentioned and my artwork shown around 10 times in Hemmings. And that helped out a lot. Out a lot. It's, it's, if you want something, you got to fight for it. You got to, you got to constantly work at it. And Hemmings got the ball rolling. My friends over at the AAC Museum in Hershey featured my art. And you have a lot of kids out there that when I was at Hershey and it was an open it was for the Hershey Fall Meet. A lot of families bring kids, and the mom and dad's asking me about how do you draw? How do you do this? Is this a painting or what? And you want to inspire kids because you know what? Not every dad is a mechanic. Not every mom is a mechanic. But they have this passion for automobiles. So why not encourage, And I always look at my art as the art of the automobile. I remember years ago, I was at a car show. I think it was like a 40 Lincoln. It had all this chrome on it. Mm-hmm. And I like to get in tight with an automobile, a close-up, because that's where you see the true art of the car designer. Mm-hmm. And so, like, say, with the Cadillac here and the Cadillac fin, I'll get up close and things that you really don't look for. So I had this beautiful photograph I had taken, and my wife says, "You can't use that photo." And I says, "Well, why not?" She says, "Look in the chrome." And in the chrome, here's some guy scratching his butt,
Yeah,
and I'm like,
it's a typical car show. Yeah, I mean that would be real.
right. But you learn so much. You go to a car show, and I love the history of the car.
Me too.
No matter what year, I always tell people, I go, take a kid to a car show. It's an outdoor history lesson on four wheels.
Mhm.
It's you stand by a car and it was made, like say the Model T here. This was the last model year for the Model T at 27. I says, you're looking at the top of technology for that time period, what was popular in color, style, technology. And then you see this light bulb going off. And I think if you make more people aware of it,
Mhm.
it makes more people interested in the hobby, you know.
Yeah, without a doubt.
It's we all know it's like if you see a GTO, it's like, oh God, I was 13 years old and these cars were like, wow, this is really great, you know. And it's funny how now the younger generation loves the retro cars, but the problem now is you can't touch them because they're so expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you're a guy that you could draw all kinds of things, but what is it about illustrating cars that you love so much? What is it about cars that does
Well,
it for you?
If I think this hits home right with Richard's last issue of Crankshaft. It was a 1960 Polaris Matador.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going on 67. And when that car came out, I remember these cars as a big old boat. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember seeing them, but you really never paid attention to them. And by the time I was in high school, these cars were like double parked and they were getting ready to get towed. And they've seen their better days.
Mm-hmm.
But drawing this automobile that I really never paid attention to, and then I'm discovering all the design from the automotive designer, and the tail fin on this car, and it's so long with the tail lights. It almost looks like a rocket, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And you discover all these little nuances that the designer put in, and it has to be captured just right so that you, the viewer, you look at that and you'll say, that's a nice looking car, hey, that's nice. But you hit the mark right on the spot because they see that as an old car that they recognize. When someone comes up to you and say, what the heck is that? You missed your mark. So right. I was raised, and then of course working in advertising, it's like do the job right the first time so you don't have to go back and redo it again, But then when you work in advertising, the client will say, I love it, but my thought is there's no buts. You love it. It's sold. Go away.
That's it.
Perfect. Let's do one more.
Yeah, let's do one. Yeah, let's do one more. Sure, the meter's running. No problem.
It's perfect. Let's do one more.
Let's do one more.
Yeah, it's funny when I was at the Saratoga meet, we were judging, and I'm in with my group, my team, and we're adding up the scores, and I look up, and between all the cars is that car, the one that you did the artwork from, at the same angle. Parked at the same angle. It just hit me like all of a sudden, like, whoa, there it is. There's the magazine cover. And it was just funny how it just right in the middle of doing that. Just so now I said, great. Now I got to go look at it. Really good.
You do a double take.
Yeah, without a doubt.
I have a very short story about Crankshaft issue number 1 with the Tucker.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So owned by Mr. Howard Kroplik.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I, when we started dating, our first movie was A Man in His Dream, and it was about the Tucker. And that has always followed me. And in 2014, I donated a metal cabinet with artwork, and I got permission. I contacted my friend Rob Ida, and he'll build you a Tucker, a brand new 1948 Tucker, if you want it as a race car, or if you want it as your everyday car, if you wanted to. Just bring money. So I told him, I says, I want to design this cabinet that looks like it was at the Tucker dealership in their garage. And with that, he says, sure. It's like, it's always good to get permission, and then you're good to go. So we did this cabinet, and I go to all the logos. I had to re-illustrate all the logos to this cabinet. And so this is where your graphic design experience comes in, because I could recreate something that hasn't been in print in over 70 some odd years. And at this time, I can't remember what it sold for, but 100% of the proceeds went to the museum. Because to me, it's, if you don't have your museums, then the future generations cannot learn. And, it's, I mean, if I walk down the street here, I think the oldest car I would see is my beater car, a 2005 rare Toyota Corolla. But it gives, to me, it's like with the pandemic winding down, it's to me, family and kids, it's anything to get them together. Now, gentlemen, I got a question for you. Did your parents take you, say, to the Bronx Zoo or down to Manhattan, or Sunday trips? It's important to do this stuff, because now the kids could be locked away in their room and you won't even see them for the entire weekend, So, it's like, bring them to a car show, bring them to a concourse event. It's fun to get dressed up at a concourse event,
Mm-hmm.
as long as I can wear shorts.
And a hat.
And a hat.
And
And a hat.
Got to have the trademark.
I mean, I think cars are a great way to make new friends. I mean, it's kind of a truism in life that as you get older, you're exposed to fewer new things, and it's kind of harder to meet new friends. I mean, most of the friends you meet are when you're in school, or when you're in your early 20s or something like that. And yeah, you meet couples and stuff, but when you're in something like the car hobby, I find anyway, it's so much easier to meet new friends that way, because you have a shared interest. And there's also a destination involved, whether it's a show, or you're going to a Cars and Coffee, or you're just taking a ride with the guys, and you park someplace and you're hanging out. I mean, this is the way we forge relationships, right? And I think that, Joe, to your point before, what's so important about taking kids out to car shows or whatever is that it puts you in a social situation. You're not texting somebody, you're not building a relationship with your thumbs. You're building a relationship face to face. And those kind of experiences are becoming rarer and rarer, and if you can do that in the company of beautiful design and, the great smells and sounds of cars, I defy you to not like going to a car show on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning. And the thing that's great about those shows too, is that they're usually in the morning. So it's 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. You show up, you have a coffee, you walk around for a couple hours. It's now just 10 o'clock. You have the whole rest of the day.
Yeah.
And you've already done something amazing with your day before the day even really began.
And
So
what do
I
we
really-
keep saying here? You meet the nicest people at car shows.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you have car trouble, People will bend over backwards to get you back on the road, jump your car. I've seen that many, many times. You know,
Oh yeah. I mean, we're all helping each other. Mike is known for doing that. Just, if you happen to know Mike and have his phone, he just comes. He calls himself quadruple A.
Yeah, we're one better than AAA.
One better than AAA. He
Well-
shows up with his tool chest, kind of like Harvey Keitel as the cleaner.
What is
You gotta
quadruple A?
bring it.
It's always available automotive assistance. Or
Right.
any of my friends qualify for quadruple A.
Quadruple A. Okay. Well, you can become a friend of the Auto Lab radio show here by liking us on Facebook, right where you see us. If you have a question about cars or you just want to say something about the automotive culture or whatever, please put it in the chat. Or you could maybe even call us. You can be on our show next week.
You
Just
can call us
let
right
us know
here
that you
at
want to do that.
516-488-3225. It's right here. Call me and we'll get you on the air.
And Mike will help change your tire. Yeah.
That's it.
So, right. So just make sure you friend us here on Facebook and keep track of the Auto Lab. So Joe, a question for you about going from, I mean, you were an illustrator for Archie Comics.
right.
which
Art
is-
director, illustrator. Yep.
Right. Art director and illustrator. Tell me a little bit about how the comic world and the car world may overlap, because I see that there are some similarities in terms of the fan base,
Well, when Mark McCourt was interviewing me back in 2009, we were just talking on the side, and I said, Mark, I go, the comic book industry will put in automobiles to get that draw for girls and boys. And Mark, in September 2009, I appear again, but now in a Hemmings Daily blog, and it was called Archie's Cool Cars. And so with the permission of the publishers, I got covers of, there's a Stingray, there's one with an Avanti. Alex, I'm sorry, I know, I don't know if I sent you the link or whatever, but
I'm gonna see if I can find it right now. Archie's Cool Cars is the name of
Archie's Cool Cars. Yep, by Mark McCourt. And there's an Avanti. There's Archie he's got like a record player in the car and a movie projector, and Mark did a wonderful little editorial on that. And again, I was taken by surprise. I think the best surprises are the ones that come out of left field. You're not waiting for it. It just taps you on the shoulder and says, "Here I am." But the comic book industry, they have a gigantic Comic-Con in Manhattan at the Jacob Javits Center. And I went from 05 to 09 when I retired in 2010. But it's the kids, they get interested in this. And it's like, how many times it's like someone's come up to you and it looks like a shoe with wheels. Fantastic. The
Here, I think
kids
I
are
found some
taking
of
it
these,
from their imagination. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I saw the
Archie's
Avanti
Dupapi.
down there.
Veronica had a 53 Corvette. Stingray.
There's the
This is
Avanti.
the Avanti. Reggie.
Yeah.
Everybody hated Reggie. I had a good
Well,
conversation with Reggie. He's got this thing where everybody hates him.
Do you think that's just because of his personality or the way he's drawn?
See, Reggie was he was the lovable bad kid. He always had the hots for Betty and Veronica, anything to upset the balance of Archie.
Right.
But Archie, one of the great things about this is that when I started working with Archie Comics in 1989,
That's cool.
I got to meet the all-time greats of the golden era.
Mm.
They were kids when they started with Archie during World War II.
Uh-huh.
And this one artist, Ed White, he said, I was on the corner in Manhattan when Archie Comics was located in New York. I was waiting for a city bus and I was sketching. And he didn't know that he was in front of the Archie Comics offices. So one of the guys from Archie was running down to get coffee and he sees this kid drawing. He says, "Say, kid, can you draw Archie?" And he says, "Sure." He says, "Come with me." Went up to the offices, he drew, and he was hired on the spot. No college education or anything.
Talk about right place, right time.
Yeah.
Can you draw
I-
Archie?
I got
That
to
could be weird like that.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays it's like, you got to know graphic design, you got to know illustration. In New Jersey, for cartoon art, you got the Joe Kubert School of Cartooning. And this is where a lot of good artists come out of. And, to me, it's one of these things where you always have to encourage kids. They're the future,
Without a doubt.
and I says you could pursue illustrating as a hobby, or you can do it as a something just to relieve stress. Bad day at work,
Yeah.
have a cocktail, start drawing. But getting back to the car shows, it's I always felt Wayne Carini is the godfather of cars and coffee. His shop was the F40 garage was just like a half hour away. So I used to go to it when Wayne Carini was, you didn't have an audience with the Pope,
When he didn't have gray hair.
when he didn't, yeah. But to me, he, always a gentleman, a scholar, always taking time out. And that's what it is. It's like if someone's asking you something about a car, you got to tell them the story, a light story. Then if they want to get into details, I used to do this when I had my radio show. Every car has a story. I used to do these live behind the scenes of Every Car Has a Story. And I would interview people and I would say, well, tell me about your car. I met this one little boy, his father owned a 54 Cadillac. This kid knew who the president was at that time, who made the car, and I'm like, I was stunned. I was really, really stunned.
How old was the kid?
I'd say he was 50. No, I'd say he was around. I would say he was around 12 years old. And he,
it's with Wayne. I've seen him in action. A little bit before, I guess, right when his show was starting. So he wasn't such an icon. And I saw him at car shows and and spending time with people. But even after the show was super popular, always had time. I mean, I remember I took my son to a car show. Yeah, I think it might have been the Greenwich Concours. And he was there, and my son was like 9, and he took the time to really, talk with him about cars. My son's, really into it, knows like every Ferrari and whatever. And then after we were finished, he said to me, if we don't, I said, thank you so much for spending some time with my son. He said, if we don't get the next generation interested in this, it will die.
Absolutely.
So he really sees it as a mission to do that. And I even find, I have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Ian Carr, shameless plug with a K. And where I'm building mostly Porsche 914s. I do some work on Ferrari 308s and Mustang 65 Mustang that I have. but it's a lot of how-to, just because I believe that wrenching is therapy, and I want to share the joy of it. And a lot of people are intimidated by it. But anyway, so in doing that, I get so many questions, messages, just people, interested, and I make sure that I take the time to answer every single one of those comments, because you never know what that one connection that you make, that one seed that you plant, becomes a giant oak tree. It
Definitely.
fosters a huge interest. I mean, I had a mechanic when I started wrenching, and I kind of came to it late in life. I was probably in my early 40s, and I was just doing a little bit of work on the 65 Mustang that I got as a father-son project, with
Nice.
just to do something with my son. And I remember at the beginning I said, I'm never gonna touch anything that could strand me or hurt me. So it was only cosmetic stuff that I started doing. But then, you kind of get into it and you're like, let me just try this a little. Let me work on the steering. Let me work on the brakes. And there was a mechanic that I would take it to nearby, who was kind of like my guru, just like the professor, to check my work, because I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to do anything that would hurt anybody. And he talk about planting seeds. He just kept telling me, you can do it. Just take your time and read up on it. And he was very encouraging. And sometimes he would send me away, when I would bring him work to do on my regular car. He's like, you can do this. I'm not doing it. You do it.
Absolutely.
And just doing that, just those little encouragements. I mean, now I just finished rebuilding a car from scratch, nut and bolt. Like, there was nothing on this car and in the engine. And I don't want to blow the suspense, because next week I'm gonna have a special video for you guys. But
Cool.
But it's amazing how a little bit of encouragement and a little bit of time that you spend with people face to face, which is the key, can really, alter the course of people's lives and interests and everything else. So
Yeah.
I know it's a long-winded way of me getting around to it, but just because I think anybody who's watching us right now or listening to what we're saying, it's just such a great opportunity, and I just hope everybody takes it.
Ian, what you just said and the story you related about Wayne Carini and your son, more illustration of how car people are the nicest, friendliest, most social people in the world. And everybody should go to a car show if you want to meet those kind of people.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Before the pandemic, very active with the AACA Cape Fear chapter here in Wilmington. And I would be like the pitch man, like the barker. And a good friend of mine, I call Hambone, Michael Hamby. And he has several Model T Fords, Model A, beautiful cars. And I was getting people, I go, hey, you want to see how you would start a 1923 Model T? And you'd be surprised. And I would get a crowd.
Yep.
And then my friend Hambone would come and he would start it up. And then he would give a tour of the car after it was running, and then he shut it off. And people were like surprised. I go, can you imagine? It's a rainy Saturday night and the wind's blowing sideways and the rain's coming down, and you got to crank this car because you got to get somewhere. Now it's like you get in the car and you go.
What life must have been like back then. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, they didn't know any better. That was the top of technology. I mean, you figure 23 years before 1923, you would get into a horse and a carriage,
Yeah.
Away we go. Chip. Go
Joe,
see.
Joe, I have a mission.
Joe, I have a mission. Robert out.
Well, I was just going to add.
What's your mission?
The horse and cart had to have its oats, didn't it? The horse had to be filled up with oats.
Yes.
And then you had to clean up after it.
And then you had to make sure that the horse's shoes hadn't thrown themselves off.
Right.
Right.
That's right.
Early maintenance.
Early maintenance.
Early emissions.
What do you want to say, Mike?
Yeah, I have an assignment for Joe. Joe, if you're up for it, we're talking here about getting younger generations interested in the car car culture, car
Yes,
business,
sir.
right?
Yes, sir.
I teach automotive at the City University here in New York, and one of my missions is getting young people into the trades, right?
Mhm.
So, with your background in advertising and cars, what we need is a recruiting poster, like the World War II and One recruiting posters for the military. Like the
Sure.
most famous one that comes to mind is Uncle Sam Wants You, right?
Right.
So something like this car wants you, or this car needs you.
We
Can you
we
put that
need you
together
to
for
wrench.
Oh, what was that, Robert?
We need you to wrench
A,
right across
Come
the
wrench.
front at an
Yes.
angle.
a
Well,
rent,
that would be
yeah.
interesting
That-
if,
I
if
could
Joe
draw a
feels
wrench.
like doing that. Yeah, I think
We-
I put my money on you for doing that. Yeah.
I'll do it. I'll do it. Let's
Recruiting poster for technicians.
yeah. You know, one of the things I was very surprised with when I was doing Every Car Has a Story, we were on the air for 81 shows, met a lot of fantastic people, and I had a really, and we're good friends to this day, a young lady named Kayla Rain Dancer out in Montana, car girl, okay, works for a living as a nanny, and she owns a 62 Ford Thunderbird convertible. Just put in the hydraulics for the convertible top to come up. She owns a 68 Mustang that her grandfather left her. Beautiful car, and that's getting a new engine putting in. A 60, I think it's a 68 Pontiac Tempest, copper with a
Mhm.
black vinyl roof. And then she's got 14
Nice.
cars on her property that she's the type of woman where, like, if you see a box of puppies on the road, she'll take them in. So she sees an old car and it's like, oh, I got to restore that. I says, Kayla, you got a lifetime. But the thing is, there's so many talented women out there that want to
Yeah.
get their hands dirty. Now, like say with Kayla's situation, it's money's tight, you know, and to go to school, it's either school or no work, or work and no school, you know. And I think we got to get those people into classrooms like Mike, so it's affordable for them, you know.
People with that passion.
Yes, and I mean, it's. I'll ask her. Like last week, I said, "So how was your weekend?" She says, "Well, I was working on Miss Daisy." Now, Miss Daisy is her '62 Thunderbird that she found, and it had 5,000 miles on it, and it was just a couple miles down the road in Montana. And it's a beautiful find. It's a beautiful car. To me, it's retro design at its peak, because 10 years later in '72, all those designs with the big fins, that was all gone.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
to me, it's like women play an important part. I met a really wonderful woman. Name was Joanne Creamer, and
Yes.
she worked for General Motors.
Yeah.
And she started what she told me, and correct me if I'm wrong, she told me that she started designing the interior of trunks, but it was a man's world back then. So the men got
Wow.
all the good jobs, and they gave the women, well, women know how to pick out curtains, so they know how to pick out an interior for a trunk.
Yeah.
But she
Joan's
went,
been on with us.
what's that?
Joan has been on with us. She's really something.
Yeah.
Oh, she's wonderful. She's
She's a
wonderful.
nice, wonderful lady.
And
Joe, what do you think? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. to
No, go
interrupt.
ahead, Ian.
I was just going to ask you, what do you think is the best era for automotive design? Like, if you were going to pick a decade,
Jeez.
you
That's
we-
like
we've
saying,
talked-
who's your favorite? Is it your son or your daughter?
Well, it's a Sophie's choice, right? Well, we've talked about on the show a lot of times that and at least this is my opinion also, anything post 1985 pretty much doesn't really register with me, mostly because the aerodynamics and the fuel economy issues have kind of forced engineering to follow the function, force the form to follow the function. but like for me personally, I think the era between 1965 and 1975 had such a great range of designs. You know, if you look at like 70 to 80, you have things like the Mustang 2, you know, which is not great. But you also look at like the early eras, like the 40s to the 1940 to 50, you know, and you have some of those great Packards. And
Okay, I have Ian, I got a question for you.
Go
What
ahead.
what was your first car when you were, getting your driver's license, high school?
You're not going to believe this, but it was a Fiat X19.
Oh, God.
My dad, you know what? I have to say, got to give it to my dad. So he was definitely a car guy. And he wanted me to have like a sporty car, right? And so he found this Fiat X19 used. It was a 77. It was 1981 when I got my 1980 when I got my license. And he found this used car, lightly used, and got it for me. And oh my God, it was mechanically terrible. And worst of all, for a 16-year-old boy, it didn't have a back seat. So it was very difficult to do anything else in the car besides drive it. But it did, the sportiness of it was really fun. But why do you ask?
To me, it's, as soon as I asked you, I have this big smile. Now, the next question, same question for Mike. What was your first car?
I still have my first car, 1962 Pontiac Grand Prix.
Wow.
The best year
I didn't
ever
know
for
that,
Grand
Mike.
Prix, the first year and the best year.
Wow. Alex,
Wow.
how about you?
Mine was my first car because I'm an artist and I have to be so different, was a 1963 Studebaker Lark two-door. My friends had Trans Ams and I had a Studebaker. I mean, you can't get much more weirder than that. So
I sent away, remember Alphabet's cereal?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Post? On the
Yep,
back of the
Alphabets.
box, you could send
Mhm.
away for a Lark. It was a convertible model.
oh yeah.
Uh-huh.
Got it. The wheels were plastic. They weren't like the real rubber. And that Robert,
Well,
what was your first car?
well, here in jolly old Britain, I was an impoverished art student. So I'm an artist sculptor. And my first car was a 1960 Morris Minor, which I know that you had in the States for a short while. Mine was different because it had what was called semaphore indicators.
Mhm,
These were the little arms that used to flick out.
mhm.
If I went over a bad bump in the road, both of the indicator arms would come out at the same time.
Wow.
And I had that car for 14 years and I sold it.
Wow.
He may be listening, to the vice president of the Irving Trust Bank Corporation of America. He
Wow.
bought this car from me. And as it went down the road, I cried because I
Oh.
really didn't want to change the car.
Yeah.
See,
That was my first car.
that's a question Mark Green would ask you. It's like, is there ever a car that got away? And
That's the
what you
one.
have to say.
That's why. Can I
We all
just
have one.
can I just quickly add, very, very quickly? You know, Joe is making some really interesting points here. If you ask anybody about any event or time in their family, and you say, "What car did your family first have?" the doors open, and all the family history comes out, and it's all focused around the car. Where it took them, when it broke down, what happened to it, what they did with it. So the car is a social cement. It's the social cement
I agree.
of
And
our
you know
world.
what's
It's
interesting?
very
You
important.
and you rarely have pictures of them.
Yeah,
You know,
very few.
I was going back to make a list of all the cars that I've owned, and I don't have pictures of every car I've owned. I don't even think I have a picture of the Fiat. Now, some of it was, in those days, you had film and camera and, processing and whatever.
Mhm.
But, the pictures that I have, even of recent ones, are incidental. It's a picture of my house and the car happened to be in the driveway, or a
Yeah.
picture of my daughter and the car is in the background. So I'm starting a new thing where I'm taking a picture of every car, like on the day that I get it. So at
I
least
doubt I have a picture of my X19. I also had one, but there
You
is
did?
a pic. Yes,
what year?
I don't. I
Is it
don't
chiseled
remember.
in stone,
But I
like
had
or a
it.
cave drawing?
I had it right after I got out of the army, so it's like 50 years ago. But I have to tell you that the first pictures of me and cars is I'm 5 years old in my father's shop working on our 1950 Pontiac that my father bought as a total loss. All our family cars were total losses when we bought them. And that's the first picture of me working on cars at 5 years old.
Wow. Ian,
Yeah.
I have to ask you a favor. I had sent
Yeah.
Alex, it's a newspaper ad for a Moon automobile.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
I don't think I sent that one. I wasn't sure if that was, yeah,
But
I know.
but you know what I
know
have?
they-
I do have though. I have this image though, Joe. So tell me about this.
Okay, that
Talk about first
So-
cars, right?
my dad was a mailman, all right? And I can remember to this day going to the Pontiac dealership. And, as a kid, it's like you remember, but you don't remember vividly. But I remember going to the Pontiac dealership. He had just bought his brand new 1959 Pontiac Catalina. And it came with a radio and a
Mhm.
heater. And that car
Mhm.
cost $1,975. Now,
Wow.
the little boy is me, and I'm wearing a Mickey Mantle T-shirt, which is probably worth like $100,000, and a Marlon Brando motorcycle hat. Right.
Right.
So
Even then, you were wearing a hat.
even then, and I got a good crop of hair.
Yeah,
So-
good. So you're not hiding anything.
Now you got to ask me, why do I have a sour puss on my face? There's a story.
Ah,
Okay.
Okay.
Is it,
So-
is it
Because your
the
father
hood
wouldn't let you
ornament
drive
is-
it?
Mike, was Alex talking to you about this?
No.
No, no. The reason why is those cars, as you can remember, always ran hot. Dad puts me on the hood of the car after he had just drove around. And all I can remember is the back of my legs were burning up from the hood and my hands.
Oh man.
So my father would say, "Come here, Peppy. I'm going to put you on the hood of the car. Let me get my Polaroid and snap the picture." And it's like
Oh my gosh.
we're a
Call
5-year-old
child
kid.
services.
So yeah, they weren't invented yet. But I got to tell you about this Moon dealership.
yeah.
I was doing research on my old hometown newspaper, and the archives go from 1838 to 1930. So I put in my grandfather's name, and I knew he was in real estate, and I knew he lost everything during the crash of 29. And then I'm seeing these other things, and it's saying Pepitone Brothers. I'm like, what's this? I open it up. My grandfather and his brother owned a Moon dealership in Highland Park, New Jersey in 1919.
Wow.
Never heard about it. Never heard about it from my father. My father was always one for telling me about family history, when grandpa came over from Sicily in 1888, so forth, so
Mhm.
on. And I'm thinking, wow, wouldn't it be great somewhere where he kept one car and with a note saying, "To the future, enjoy." But they didn't think like that. It's like when things were old back then and they've seen their better times, they threw it out.
Yeah, it's the same today. You got to wonder what's going to happen, as we move forward. Hey, Joe, tell everybody where they can find out more about your work and, maybe
Sure.
download
They can
stuff
find out
or,
more
or if there's
about
swag or
my
books.
work. It's people that contact me. I
Mhm.
built up a reputation where it's word of mouth. I don't
Mhm.
have a website, but I am on Instagram.
Okay.
I was on Facebook. My account got hacked with 5,000 people. So
Oh, man.
Facebook decided to lock me out. It's been
Love
30
it.
days. And, it's like you're trying to get in and Facebook is like, they're
Mhm.
nowhere to be found. So right now I'm in limbo, but if you want to get a hold of me through Alex, or go on Instagram, and every car has a story. Joe Pep. I have an icon, looks like a Pepsi bottle cap, and I'll be more than happy to return your message.
Hey, Joe, what was your first driving experience? How old were you?
13. Right next to New Brunswick was a small farm community, which is now all corporate and it's all built up. It's called Camp Kilmer. Now, during World War II, if you went to Kilmer, you were going over to Europe. Well, by 1959, they closed the military base. By 1967, I was 13. Dad would take me out there in his brand new 1966 Mercury Monterey, which was later my first car. And it was like driving in a ghost town. You had stop signs. You can go by the PX. You can go by the barracks. And this is where it taught me how to drive. And I always remember saying to my father, "I'll never go over 25 miles an hour." But now Dad, he had a part-time job
Go ahead,
as
Alex.
a mailman, and he drove a bus. And I've driven old, the old GM buses that look like a loaf of bread.
Mhm.
The one like Ralph Cramden would drive. Okay.
Mhm.
And you're driving. I mean, you're a kid, and you're driving this big old bus down the street, a side street. But nowadays, social services would come after you, But we were able to do things back then, and nobody got killed. No one's eye got poked out or anything like that.
Yeah.
Metal
Joe-
dashboards and all this other stuff.
Joe, are you going to be at any car shows in the New York, New Jersey area in the near future?
As of right now, no. As of right now, no. I'm still fully vaccinated, but I'm still a little leery on things. I miss going to the Greenwich Concourse.
Yeah.
That was a wonderful experience. And what I always enjoyed about that is that you would get these people from Manhattan and they're dressed to the nines, and I always thought that was nice because when you go to a regular car show, everybody's dressed T-shirts, like maybe a sports shirt and stuff like that. But when you go to a concourse, it's like you got to get dressed up because it's that type of event. And so this one guy said, "Well, I don't like getting dressed up." I said, "Well," I go, "It's up to you, But like today is our Cars and Coffee, but it's just way too hot out there for me. I'd rather go to a nighttime car show. But to answer your question, Mike, right now, homeward bound in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Alex, what do you want to say?
I just wanted to congratulate you on Crankshaft issue #1 cover and Crankshaft #2 issue cover. I mean, that's really something. I spotted it immediately. I knew it was your artwork as soon as I saw it. It's a big deal to get a cover magazine like that. I'm sure you must be very proud of it.
Well, can I tell everybody the story, how this all transpired?
Sure.
Okay. Richard Lanatano gave me my break in 2009. And over the years, we've always been in contact with one another. When Richard reached out to me in November of last year, and he asked me to do the cover. So working in publishing, I know the monumental costs he's going through. Now I do advertising art, an agency up in New York called McKenzie and Company. It's not the glamorous, but you know what? It's like I can work at home. If 5 days a week. I could work 7 days a week if I wanted to, but Mrs. Pep won't let me do that. And then I have automotive commission art. So the way I was brought up, old school Italian, you know, you have a friend that needs help, give it to him. And I did issue number 1 and number 2 free of charge because I want him to succeed. It's a beautiful
That's
publication.
nice.
There's a lot of hard
That's
work
awesome.
that goes into these. And by Richard not paying me, maybe he could put that money into other areas that can help the magazine. You know,
Yep.
Everybody's had a dream, you know, and he has a dream of putting together this beautiful publication. The layout is fantastic. The editorials are really great. And to me, it's more of a coffee table book than you know, like a magazine.
It is really good.
You know, so, you know, it's like as an illustrator, I'm not going out buying lumber. I'm not going out buying paint. Everything's in my head and it just gets transferred from the brain to the hand. And what I do is I block out time. It's like, okay, well, I'll work on the paid project first, and then I'll work on Richard's. Now, issue number 2, he needed it really quick. And I did that in a week's time. I'd say probably around 25 hours on
Wow.
that. But to me,
And where can they get Crankshaft?
yeah, to me,
Where-
it's even though it's digital art, you still have to draw it. You have to make the chrome look like chrome, you know. And where I learned all these tips and tricks is like I'm self-taught, but I always liked the General Motors illustrators. So if I get stuck on something, I'll go back and reference and say, well, how did they do that headlight? Or how did they do the chrome on that bumper? You know, because chrome, it's an optical illusion of the reflection that is in back of you.
Yeah.
But you got to make it believable. And I'm not one for using filters where it's like you have like the sky gradated. You know, it's I make it so again it's believable. But getting back to Crankshaft and Richard Lanateno, it was like I donated the first 2 covers so that he can make something of this magazine. And I think it's very important to have it. You know,
How can people find it? How can people get it, subscribe, whatever?
well, they do. Crankshaft does have a
Website.
they have blow-in cards. Let's see if I can get one here. Here we go. Blowing cards. They do have a website, Crankshaft. And I'm sorry, I don't have that
crankshaft.com or?
information
It's
handy.
You know what? We'll find it and put it in our Facebook stream.
Great. It's at lentinellopublishing.com.
Lentinello Publishing. Well, Joe,
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing so many of your great stories and your illustrations and your perspective on the car world. I hope you'll stick around, and we've got lots more Auto Lab to come. But you're a fantastic.
I would be honored. I would be honored.
Please stick around. We're going to be back in just a minute with a great report from Robert Erskine, who's going to tell us a little bit about what happened to leaded gasoline. Yeah, people think it's gone, but I don't know, maybe not. And of course, we'll also hear from Robert Sinclair at AAA, and Alex will tell us a little bit more about what's going on with the AACA. And we'll be back with lots more Auto Lab right after this. New York Transmission Group is a team of automotive and transmission experts. Utilizing a combined 100 years of experience, our professionals from Reliable Transmissions and Lee Miles have merged to better serve the 5 boroughs and surrounding areas. With a new leader, a new location, and a new brand, New York Transmission Group is ready to offer updated superior customer service paired with our established quality repairs. Visit us in College Point, Queens, or at nytransmissiongroup.com. All right, welcome back to the Auto Lab. I'm Ian Carr, along with Mike Porcelli, Alexander Sotanis, and Robert Erskine, and of course, Joe Pepitone. Joe Pep, our fantastic guest this week. We've just had a great conversation with Joe about his illustration and what it means to be in the car world. And if you missed any of it, you can just replay it right here on Facebook after the show is done. So we hope you do that. Please like the page here and become a member of our Autolab family. We'd appreciate that. And if you have any questions about cars, or something going on in your car, or if you've got something where you're questioning what a mechanic is telling you, we've got a dream team here that can help sort that out for you. And I think what we're going to do is continue on right now with our automotive journalist from across the pond, Robert Erskine, who's got kind of an interesting insight on leaded gasoline. Good morning, Robert.
A very good morning to you. Well, first of all, Joe Pepitone has painted, if you excuse the pun, a fantastic insight into his work. And it's all about capturing the emotion of cars and how they, if you excuse the pun again, move you. Like us all, I'm addicted to cars, everything about them, especially those which for some reason touch you and they stay in your mind. But, in this world that we have created, there are a lot of positives, but unfortunately, when we make positives, we often unwittingly create negatives. Now, I don't like to talk about negative things in particular, but there's an interesting report that came out for our little city here in jolly old England called London, better known by the Romans. So there's a Roman link for you, Joe, better known as Londinium, the Roman capital of Britain, and which Londinium, since earliest times, has been under attack and its very existence challenged. And I'll come on to where this is leading, because ever since the Romans arrived here in Britain in AD 43, they stayed here till around the 5th century, which seems a long, long time ago. But during this time and up until today, London has experienced cataclysmic events, which has always affected its population, Londoners. So without going too deep into England's history, I'll give you just a very quick run through as to what has affected Britain and where we are headed. So we had the Great Plague of London. Those of you who were around at that time may well remember this. We then had, so that was in 1665 to 66. And then straight after that, as though by a miracle of the hand of the person who sits above us in the heavens, in 1666, we had the Great Fire of London, as though this was a way of sterilizing this terrible disease. And it's interesting that today we're still talking about diseases and pandemics. So very quickly, 1832, we had the Great Cholera outbreak. This was due to insanitary conditions. Where is this heading, everybody? Well, we're getting very close. Where? Well, we're very close now. We then had something called the Great Stink in 1835. This was where the sewers couldn't take the population of people who had come into London because of the start of the Industrial Revolution, which is how cars got built, horseless carriages.
Okay.
And the Houses of Parliament had to run off because they couldn't stand what was going on. And then if that wasn't enough, we had an air pollution issue that was running in the background. I won't mention World War II for the Blitz, which we survived, or the V1 or V2 rockets. But where are we now? Well, in 1952, London experienced its worst thing. It was called the smog, or a pea super. And this was a yellowish, greenish, dense fog, which was mixed with all the sulphurous vapors and smoke from all the millions of coal fires that us Londoners had to have on to keep us warm, as well as industrial activity that was in and around the London area. But I have missed out cars, because car exhausts at the time were pumping out something called lead in the petrol. And this is tetraethyl lead that came care of the United States. General Motors were behind this wondrous material, which raised the compression ratios of those engines of that period from 1920s onwards. A great chemist, who I will not mention, came up with this discovery and said it was perfectly safe and healthy, and even washed his hands in a bucket of this stuff in front of everybody to paint a picture of clarity and cleanliness for everybody in the bright new world. Well, the report that I mentioned at the beginning is about the fact that 22 years ago in London, when government banned the use of tetraethyl lead in fuel, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? There are particles of lead floating around in our atmosphere as we are on air at this moment, and people are unfortunately breathing it in. There's a 40% background of lead particles which have never gone away and will never, ever go away. So
How
the
is
thrust
that
of my little
possible?
story, well, I'm coming on to that. The thrust of my story is, as much as cars move us, and they are the most incredible thing that has affected mankind, other than penicillin and a few other wonderful things, the automotive industry and the automobile will leave for future archaeologists a most remarkable legacy. That is the indelible millions of tons of burnt lead that came out of the combustion chambers or cylinder heads of our wondrous cars, which will never, ever, ever go away. So if you fast forward to maybe 500 years' time or 1,000 years' time, those yet to be born archaeologists will wonder as to what these particles are, where they came from, and how they arrived on London streets and probably everywhere else. So this is the archaeological legacy of the automotive industry. And
So you're
thank
telling
goodness
us that
we're
these
moving away
particles
to
are going to be
electric cars.
around as long as the cockroach?
They're going to be around by longer than the cockroach.
Well,
because
but hold
it's
on a second. Hold on
toxic
a second.
material.
I think we need to fact check some of the stuff here. I mean, it's a fascinating story, Robert, but there's a thing called rain. Okay. And rain will wash things down. I mean, there are people live in Hiroshima, with no radiation right now. So I gotta.
Where does
read
the
up on
lead
this
go?
a little bit.
Where do these microscopic particles, and this is
I'm
what
sure
we
it
are
goes
talking
into the
about.
water. No,
And then what happens to the water? It goes to the sea. The sea evaporates. The particles go up into the atmosphere and they come down again.
No.
Yeah.
You know what? Maybe somebody who's a scientist, an atmospheric person who's watching us on Facebook today.
Yeah.
Can
Come in
fact
and
check
comment.
the article.
Get Al Roker. Get Al Roker.
Yeah.
He's right around you guys. His father.
I'm sure. I do remember reading stories about how lead from cars, from gasoline, had made its way into reservoirs from runoff from the street. So I do know that's happened, but do
you want to hear something even more remarkable? And I'll keep it short. Did you know that within a few years of this lead stuff coming into petrol, the crime numbers increased? They increased in America and they increased in Europe. The moment this stuff was removed, scientists and social researchers discovered a demographic graph that the crime wave and what we call bad behavior diminished. So there's a lot of research going on.
That's true. No, that's true.
I have a theory on that one.
You do, Mike.
Robert?
What is it?
But
Come on, Mike. Give it to me.
The high compression engine that the lead made possible allowed for faster getaway cars.
Yes.
So that's what it is. Well, I remember reading a piece about how there's a theory, in ancient Rome, you mentioned ancient Rome before, Robert, that the Romans were the first really to have like sophisticated plumbing in this
lead pipes.
And the pipes were lead. Yeah. And there are people that believe that the fall of Rome was related to the fact that there were lead pipes, and that it made people nuts, that it got people had lead poisoning, and they started to think unclearly and the empire fell as a
Yeah.
result of that.
Yeah.
So I mean, I 100% believe that little things that we're not even aware of that we think are insignificant have tremendous effect on
Yeah.
you know, what's happening with our
Robert, I
lives.
have a question about the Roman history.
Yeah,
What
go
year,
on, fire away.
what year did my ancestors leave London?
AD 40. Hang on a moment. Hang on a minute. I used to be very good at history at school. Hang on a minute. Let's get this here. They arrived in AD 43, remaining until the 5th century.
And
think
what
that was
was
a
it that
Wednesday.
drove them out? Was it the food?
It was us Brits that drove them. No, it was the Anglo-Saxons. The Anglo-Saxons invaded and they kept on coming here. And eventually the Italians thought, do you know something? We don't need this. We don't need these long-haired, bearded lunatics taking our women and children. Let's just head back home to warmer climates.
I think they
Wow.
missed the food back home.
I think they did. I think
And
they
Joe
Thank you.
agrees with me.
Let me tell
Thank
you
you,
something. In 1985, I was over in London on a business trip. And one thing I can remember when I was over there was that the smell of diesel
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
hung heavy.
yeah.
And this was at a time when it was the anniversary of the ending of World War II, and they were having street fairs, and they were having photographs in these streets that were completely bombed out by the V2 rockets.
Yeah.
And it was a wonder, and to see a castle in person, it's like it just blows your mind.
Yeah.
But you see, Robert, it's what you do. It's very important because it's history. You know, you're saying things I never heard of, and you take that with you.
Yeah.
You know, it's like to me when I was on the radio, I would always say, in order to move forward into the future, we have to know our past,
Exactly.
good and bad.
Exactly.
Well,
And
there are some physicists that believe the past and the future are the same thing, but that's a separate conversation.
well,
You know, I'm just going to quickly add in something. I mentioned the great smog. Now, Joe and I've just realized, are exactly the same age. Joe looks much younger than me because Joe hasn't got a full beard. But we both look young and youthful. I can tell you. I can tell Joe's a very youthful, lively, fun guy. But my late dad was a doctor, and I remember him telling me this remarkable story. So this was at the time of the Great Smog, 1952. There was a huge, it was absolutely devastating. My dad got a call to go and visit a patient who had collapsed. This was the day of the pea super. If you put your hand out in front of you, just outstretched arm, you couldn't see your hand. He had to pay a gentleman £5, a neighbor, to walk in front of the car with a torch to guide him to where this patient had collapsed. This was 4 miles away, and it took him over an hour and a half to get there.
Robert, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Winston Churchill's secretary die from this?
Do you know, I think you might be right.
The pea super?
This is how bad it was.
Yeah, 12,000 people died in that 1 week. It was a week of constant pea super. You couldn't see, the transport stopped, people couldn't get around. And this stuff got into your house. People sat in their houses in this yellowy haze.
Serious stuff.
So it was very serious.
So
the main thing
I
is-
remember the New York Daily News front page, and I think it was around 1965, and it was a photograph taken from, I believe it was from the Rockefeller Center, looking down, so you'd see the Empire State. You couldn't see past the Empire State because there was so much smog.
Wow.
I remember it was like smog alert or something like that.
Yeah.
I remember that. We were used to seeing pictures of LA like that every day, but to see it in New York was remarkable.
I did a concourse event out in Salt Lake City in 2011, and not really familiar with Salt Lake. They're like in a bowl, and you would have these electronic billboards saying smog alert today and everything else. And you know, you don't realize it. It's like you're working in that environment.
Yeah.
Kids are playing, everybody's doing their household stuff, and you're breathing this garbage in, you know. So
Great
I
we
think
finally
that
got a little bit of a handle on it.
We just got to learn from history and not pay. We got to pay attention better. You know,
Yeah.
Well,
overall.
EVs are the newest thing, they're the greatest revolution in the automotive history. And as it moves on, it will become cleaner, hopefully.
Yep, I think so. Even as the power
electric
plants
cars.
have to crank harder and pump more stuff in the atmosphere, but hopefully we'll find a way to sort it all out and recover our climate, or at least not perish from it, right?
No.
So thank you, Robert. As
And
always, for your
I have a
report.
question for you. With
Yeah.
with all the big automakers being told that electric cars are going to be manufactured in 2035, you know, that's going to help the environment. You know, I know a lot of people are not happy about it with electric.
Mhm.
Hydrogen, I saw something on CBS Sunday morning, I think it was last week, on hydrogen cars.
Mhm.
You know, I'm not familiar with hydrogen, but a clean source. To me, with electric, it's like you still have your power plants, but they're still producing things the old
Well,
way.
that's the thing.
You know?
Yeah, and you've got the batteries, you know, they have to strip mine the you know, the elements for. So there's definitely environmental impacts. It's just shifted. The environmental damage is different, and you know, I'm optimistic though that science will figure out a way to sequester the carbon in the atmosphere, if for no other reason. And this is actually a good proponent for capitalism. There's so much money to be made by the company who figures this out, or the people who
Yep.
figure this out, that there's so much incentive to get it done that I think it will be done. I think it'll be done before we get into you know, before it
So
gets
far, we've always
incredibly
found the
worse.
solution for every problem. I don't see us breaking that pattern. Do you?
Not yet.
No, but we have definitely you know, started a momentum going, and it's a lot like, you know, it takes 13 miles to turn an oil tanker. I think it's going to take, you know, many years for us to turn things around, you know, on this level, but you know, we'll see what it's all about. We're going to step away for a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to have Robert Sinclair. We talk about traffic in LA and New York. Maybe we'll learn a little bit more about that right after this.
Special technical information message from D&J Automotive, located at 3830 Merrick Road in Seaford, Long Island. A special technical information message from D&J Automotive, located at 3830 Merrick Road in Seaford, Long Island. Many years ago, before electronic controls, there were engine analyzers, a console cabinet filled with vacuum and pressure gauges, voltometers, an ammeter, an oscilloscope, and maybe even an exhaust gas analyzer. These old-fashioned gauges and meters were important diagnostic tools. That was yesterday. Today, that trouble tree has grown into whole volumes of diagnostics, and you need a facility that has all of the up-to-date equipment. The most effective diagnostics are performed by technicians who understand your car. The tools have become more complex, and the time that is invested in learning how to use these tools and understanding the data it presents is an important measure of the technician's actual capabilities. If you have diagnostic or mechanical questions about your car and live in the Seaford, Long Island area, please call Don or Jerry at 516-781-7240. That's 516-781-7240.
I gotta love the Long Island accent in that spot. Yeah, you got problems with your car, you just talk to us.
That's a Brooklyn
Uh,
accent.
Is it a Brooklyn accent?
he's
I don't
from
know.
Brooklyn.
It's some sort of accent. So
Hey, I
welcome
got
back to
one
Auto
for you.
Lab. Yeah.
I got one
What's
for
up?
you. Now,
Go ahead, Joe.
this accent, see, down south, they think I'm from New York, but this is really a New Brunswick accent.
Yeah, you
I've
don't have a
never
New York
lost.
accent. Yeah.
But we're in between Philadelphia by 60 miles and
Mhm.
Manhattan by 25.
Mhm.
Now, I feel I'm blessed because if I go 10 miles to the northeast, it's Staten Island. In Staten Island, they talk like this, you know? So
Yeah.
it's like, Alex, give me a cream cheese with a bagel and toasted, make it snappy. But if you went to
Mhm.
Bayonne, Bayonne sounds
Mhm.
like they got marbles in their mouth. Like, what are you talking about? You know, get your car out of my driveway or I'll get it towed.
Yeah.
And that goes for you too, Robin. You know, gee
Well,
whiz.
it's everywhere.
Good that way.
It's everywhere, you know. It's everywhere. It's the fun thing. You got to wonder though if accents will become less of a thing now that we're all so connected, you know, and everybody hears as you grow up the way other people sound. You know, accents really happened because there wasn't a lot of hearing outside your world, right?
Right.
So dialects kind of came about. So now with Zoom and everything else, it'll be interesting to see if accents have a future, but you know, we'll
Well,
check that out.
I think they do.
When we moved to the Carolinas, I wanted my family just to do a 1 minute clip and see
Mhm.
if we changed. And they all thought I was crazy. You know, now my wife, she works in education down here. So I hear the word y'all all the time.
Yeah,
And
it's easy to slip into y'all too.
oh, y'all come back now here. If I tell people, they'll ask me. I'll tell them, I'll say, well, I'm from the South. They'll look at me. They'll say, the South? I go, yeah, Southern Connecticut, y'all. Y'all come back now here.
Southern Connecticut, y'all. Well, you heard the Willie Nelson on the road again theme. That can only mean one thing. Our friend Robert Sinclair is back with more news from AAA. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning, and I hope everyone is well. And just a fascinating discussion about lead and all its ramifications.
Who thought? Who
Yeah.
thought there would be a fascinating conversation about lead on the Auto Lab?
Yeah, well, you know, our gasoline report, AAA has the gas price report every day, and I get probably 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 emails per day from the Oil Price Information Service with some of the most arcane information about the oil and gasoline markets. And I'm still trying to figure out RINs, renewable identification numbers, but it's just a fascinating topic, and there's so much going on about it. And you know, have you seen the price of gasoline lately?
How much is
how
it
did
up
you
in
miss
New York? How much is it up in New York now?
New York is at $3.26 a gallon. It's up 4 cents in just the last week.
Wow.
And it's interesting because we are halfway done with the year. And if we look at the national average, it's $3.12 per gallon. That's also up 4 cents in the week. At the beginning of the year, gasoline was $2.25, and now it's $3.12. But looking at crude oil, that's the fascinating part. It began the year at $47.62. It's now $75.16. And we're talking about WTI, West Texas Intermediate, not that European Brent stuff. We're talking about good old American WTI.
Don't be offended,
And
Robert.
yes.
I'll try not to be.
Yes, please.
I'll try very hard.
You know, I haven't seen the results yet, but there was a virtual meeting of OPEC Plus yesterday, and have not heard the results, but they were deciding, or supposedly going to decide, on whether or not they were going to increase the output of crude oil, given the global uptick in demand with the vaccine taking hold and people getting more confident, especially in the United States. Restrictions being lifted, people driving like crazy. So that's going to make a big difference as to whether or not the price continues to go up. A lot of Americans are having problems paying for gasoline at the price that it is. Back in March of 2018, during a good economy, AAA did a survey of drivers, and 40% said they would have problems paying for gasoline at $3 a gallon or above, that they would have to cut back in some other part of the family budget, not be able to eat out. not make a major purchase of an appliance or something like that, switch to the smaller, more economical family vehicle. Most families have two, big heavy SUV and a small economy car, and we're there. You know, we're above $3 a gallon, well above $3 a gallon in the tri-state. And
meanwhile, in Europe, it's like $6 a gallon. You know,
yes,
it's always,
but they have better roads as a result.
It's
And-
in fact, it's
Yeah.
in fact $9.47 for a gallon here.
Wow.
it's almost
So you
$10
guys
a
are really
gallon?
having it easy.
Yeah.
Wow.
How
Well,
much,
you know-
Robert? How much was that?
Not $9.47
A gallon.
Well,
English
that's
gallon.
always, Europe's always been high.
Yeah.
I pumped
Yeah.
gas for Esso in
Esso.
1970, and they used to
Mhm.
get these flyers come in, and I remember seeing a price, and it was like I think in Norway it was like $4 a gallon US. And we said, "Oh, that will never happen." Meanwhile, back then, gasoline was 28 cents. You know,
Well, I used to work in an Esso as well, and I remember they had to change the pump because they never thought it would go above 99 cents a gallon,
right?
and the pumps all need to be changed when
Extra
that
digit. Yeah.
A Bonneville, a Pontiac Bonneville,
Mhm.
the ones the size of a Queen Mary, would take if they were
Yeah.
bone dry, and we would get it up to all goose eggs up to $10. And the guy says, "Well, I'm not paying; it's zero." And it's like, get out of here.
That's
Gasoline here in the Carolinas is we get it through Colonial
On the
pipeline,
pipeline.
funny. Mhm.
and
When it
Pipeline.
works.
Mhm.
and our gas is like 286, 289.
Mhm.
What I don't understand is how one gas could be 10 cents cheaper and it's on the other side of town. You know, that part. I never
Zone
could
pricing.
Yeah,
That's called zone pricing.
So
Yeah.
Robert,
Where
what are we
And
doing
capitalism
now to,
too. You know,
Yeah. Well, when gas would go up, and I was taking the train from Connecticut to New York, you would get a lot of new faces on the train taking train service. But the problem is that they would only stay with it for a month, maybe, because it's Americans. They like to get in the car and go nowhere, you know. Whereas with the railroad here in the States, you got to work with their system. And I would say in a year's time, I would be late to work maybe 3 times because of the train. Whereas with the automobile, every day we'd be going down Interstate 95 and it's bumper to bumper traffic. But you get these people where they don't like a train because they got to be at that schedule on that time period to get home.
Mhm.
And you can't, to me, it's like with a train, you just got to go with the flow.
there's no way to win. It's bottom line. You know.
Well,
Where
we're
we going
seeing.
with this,
But Robert, so
Yeah.
what I know that there's been some detail about traffic and congestion. Speaking of what Joe was talking about, what's the big news that happened with that?
Well, with the 4th of July holiday, we are seeing the greatest number all time of those who are driving for their holiday trip. 91% of the 47 million
Wow.
people that are traveling for 4th of July holiday are driving to their destination. Roughly 43.6 million people driving. Now you were talking you're talking about the fact that people were leaving their vehicles and going into the public transportation when gasoline got high. Well, we're seeing the opposite effect now as a result of the pandemic.
Right.
Even though demand was down significantly for gasoline, probably 50%, which signaled much less driving. We're seeing now that people abandoned public transportation to get in their cars to avoid exposure to the
Right.
coronavirus. Ridership on
Right.
the Long Island Railroad is down 50-60%. Same thing for the Metro North, and similar for the subway. So we're choked with traffic all the time. And we're seeing a lot of people, I think, are just carrying over their habits from pandemic and deciding to drive for 4th of July holiday. We're seeing people take a 4th of July trip that never take a 4th of July trip, the so-called revenge travel, where folks have been cooped up for so long, they have to get out and do something. They're going somewhere, they're staying longer, they're spending more money. Now, yet I'm trying to speak English, and yet, despite the fact that we're seeing gasoline prices as expensive as they are, we crunched the numbers from our travel agency and TripTik requests for the most popular destinations. Number one was Cape Cod, and that's a 400-mile round trip. And if your car gets 25 miles per gallon, you're going to burn 16 gallons on that trip. And at the national average of $3.12 a gallon, you'll spend $49.92 on gasoline. That's not bad. The fifth
Especially
most
4
popular,
people in the car.
yeah, the fifth most popular destination were the Outer Banks, the Carolinas. That is a 1,000-mile round trip. You'll burn 40 gallons on that trip and spend $120 on the gasoline. Now, you'll probably spend more than that on dinner one night for a family of 4. So in the grand scheme of things, gasoline is still relatively cheap for that trip, for that holiday trip. The one thing that you cannot factor in is the congestion. And the INRIX organization has been crunching the numbers. They do anonymous tracking of cell phones, GPS devices, and infotainment systems in cars. And they said, no surprise, that the busiest road for this holiday weekend would be the Cross Bronx Expressway. And they assign a multiplier. Yeah, no surprise. They assign what they call a multiplier.
Somebody actually got paid to say that?
Yeah, imagine. And the multiplier for La Crosse Bronx Expressway is 3, meaning that if your trip normally takes 1 hour on that road, the trip for the holiday would take 3 hours. They also say the Long Island Expressway in New York City, in Queens, is going to be very busy with a multiplier of 2. Brooklyn Queens Expressway, a multiplier of 2.5, and Route 440 on Staten Island with a multiplier of 2. So,
wow.
I don't know if you've noticed, but it seems like there's a lot of traffic all the time now in the city of New York. And for this getaway, the holiday, even worse.
When I lived in New Jersey, I used to travel down to Alexandria, Virginia. And this was back in the 80s. And it was a 4-hour trip one way. And you always took the beltways. And the beltways were designed to so that you didn't have to go into Washington, D.C. And it was always easy to get down to. Now, to get up north, just to go around Washington, D.C. and the Baltimore area, it's like a knot. They're constantly building new roads. I don't even recognize the highways that I used to go down to. And so you have construction. Like right now, if you're coming down south, you would have to get through Baltimore, then through D.C., and then you're getting with a lot of traffic going to Virginia Beach. Once you cleared that, you could sail through Virginia, and then from Virginia to Wilmington, North Carolina. That's around a 5-hour trip, and but you're pretty much home free. But these big cities are just tied in a knot. And I tell anybody, if you're visiting Manhattan, if you're coming from Jersey, take the train, get in. It's the easier. You don't have to look for parking or anything like that.
Yeah.
Well, you better hope that tunnel holds up. That was built in 1910. That they just got approval to repair the Gateway Tunnel. Supposedly now they're trying to decide whether they should fix the old tunnel before they build the new one, which will take 6 or 7 years. That tunnel is that main artery for not only commuter railroads, but for Amtrak as well, from the rest of the country to go to New England. And it's in bad shape. We got another major storm like Superstorm Sandy that inundated that tunnel and caused a lot of problems. and accelerated its deterioration, we could be in big trouble. So
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
got
that
the
train might
Lincoln-
not be as reliable as you might want.
Robert, you have the Lincoln Tunnel that was built in the 20s, the Holland Tunnel that was built in the 20s. I bet you there's some good stories behind the scenes that you'll never hear about what's going on with those old tunnels. I mean, you think about it, it's like the roadways. What was the first highway? Was the Lincoln Highway?
Lincoln Highway, started in Times Square.
Yeah, and went
Yeah.
down to New Jersey through New Brunswick, and then it went out
Mhm.
west. But you have all these roads that are just what 105 years old, and
Mhm.
everything's falling apart. Look at the
Yeah.
Mianus River Bridge in Greenwich, Connecticut in 1983.
That
That's
collapsed.
Tragedy.
Yeah, the
Amazing.
Steinway Street overpass on the Grand Central Parkway collapsed.
Yeah.
In Astoria, I live in Astoria, and that road, that collapse cut the community in half. You could not get from
Yeah.
one side to the other for a year.
It's amazing that some of these
Infrastructure
systems
has
are still
become a
actually
thing.
usable. They're so old and yet they're still usable compared to what
We
life was back in the 20s compared to they are
Yeah.
now.
we owe a debt of gratitude to our grandparents that cannot be repaid, and I must
Oh,
say
yeah.
we are shaming their memories because we are not taking care of these facilities like we should, and we are not building new ones. There's always the
Yep.
talk that we don't have the money. Where did
No.
they get the money from to build all these structures?
Well, exactly. And you remember like the George Washington Bridge, when it was built, they said there was a toll on it. It was only going to be for like 20 years until the thing was paid off.
Right.
Yeah,
And then
right.
they added a second
How that
deck.
goes.
Right.
When the
Now
George
they
Washington
added, then
Bridge
they added
was-
a second deck, which
yeah.
I love that they call the second deck, and they don't do it anymore, maybe because of political correctness, but the lower deck used to be called the Martha. Do you
Yes.
remember this?
Because
There was
George
because
Washington,
the George was
and
on
Martha.
top and Martha
Yes.
was
Oh,
on the
my God.
bottom. So, but yeah, and so there's a lot of revenue being generated. You really do have to wonder where all that money is going, and that's a topic for a different day for sure.
Yeah.
Can I just ask Robert a very quick question? Talking about money, is your gasoline the same price on the freeways as it is off the freeways?
No, it's usually
No.
more expensive.
It's usually
And yeah, the marketers know that. That's zone pricing, where gasoline, the same grade, the same brand, has different prices, often within a mile
Yeah,
of each other, stations within a mile of each other.
Yeah, it's the
Gasoline
same.
tends to be more expensive in affluent neighborhoods and poor
Yep.
neighborhoods.
yeah.
Yep.
The affluent can afford it. The poor don't make any noise about it. And it tends to be more expensive on highways and just off highways. It's
And they're-
pretty
yeah.
shrewd.
Well,
And there used to
you look-
be
you look at
the gas price didn't change until the new tank came in years ago. Now it
Right.
changes every day.
Yes. What they call inventory protection, where the station that's selling gasoline,
There's a name for everything.
there's a name for everything. It's inventory protection. They anticipate that their next delivery is going to be more expensive, so they jack up the price for the
Exactly.
gasoline that's already bought and paid for and sitting in the tanks in their station. And
Right.
look, most people don't realize stations aren't making money when the price goes up. They make money when the price goes down. As the price goes down, their next supply comes in is cheaper, and they just keep the price high, and then that's when they make the money.
Right. That makes sense. Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Yeah.
So the normal cycle of rising and falling gas prices happens when they start to fall in the fall. That's when they'll start making their money.
Interesting. Well, Robert, as always, you have added some very interesting perspectives on things that could otherwise be looked at as mundane, and we really appreciate you doing that. So
Thank you so
thanks
much.
again for
Thanks,
being on the Auto Lab. We'll be back in
Thank
just
you.
a second with an advanced driving tip from our friend Robert Erskine right after this message from the Gold Shield.
Gold Shield is an organization of businesses, both large and small, that have pledged to putting an end to the national disgrace, which is veteran suicide, and also to expedite research and treatments for various cancers. When you choose to shop Gold Shield, you'll be making a direct impact in the lives of veterans and their families, as well as people who suffer from cancer. Whether it's at your grocer, your barber, your insurance professional, your internet provider, gas station, or even your favorite coffee shop, you can be sure that every veteran and cancer victim in their darkest hour will be well cared for. Please shop Gold Shield and be assured that funds will go towards those who need it the most. We bury our loved ones every day, and we can't wait any longer, so please shop Gold Shield The Simple Truth, which supports cutting-edge treatment for veteran suicide prevention and expediting cancer research.
And thanks as always to the Gold Shield for being a sponsor of Autolab. At this hour, we usually like to check in with our resident expert driving instructor, Robert Erskine, for an advanced driving tip. What do you have for us today, Robert?
Well, I'm very, very mindful of your 4th of July, and it makes great sense to give you this little safety tip, which can be applied anywhere. So, always give cyclists a wide berth. Don't drive past them close. Cyclists tend to not keep a perfectly straight line, and they're apt to wobble, as we say here in England, and not always are they aware of you or other vehicles near them either. So, by passing and giving cyclists an extra wide gap, you will pass them safely. Additionally, as you pass, slow down, giving you time to react should the lovely cyclist suddenly decide to make a change of direction, especially into your path. And additionally, your vehicle, if you go past close and quite fast, will create a turbulence which will unsettle the cyclist too. That's the tip of the week.
All right. Well, that is a good tip. And we do often encounter cyclists, so it's always good to know how to deal with that. Next up, I think we'll check in with Alex and see what's new in the world of I don't want to play that music. We have a different theme for Alex. Hold on one second. See what's happening in the world of the AACA. Alex, what's new in that wonderful organization?
Well, actually, right now in Auburn, Indiana, they have what's going on is the Antique Automobile Club of America's Central Spring Nationals. Again, it's in Auburn, Indiana. This whole weekend, that was from July 1st to the 3rd. They planned several trips during that, like they always do with these big events. They had a trip to the Auburn Cord Duesenberg Museum, the National Automobile and Truck Museum, and the Early Ford V8 Museum. So like I said, at the AACA events, there's always something great to do. On July 22nd to the 24th, the Antique Automobile Club of America's Grand Nationals is taking place at New Ulm, Minnesota. At that place, at that show, they're going to select the Zenith Award winners, which those are the cars that are the best of the best for the year, chosen from the shows, and they're getting that all together. And basically, that's it for now. I mean, all the local chapters have everything going on too locally. Any information about that, they can check out on aaca.org. There's always something going on every weekend with the AACA.
All right. Well, thanks, Alex. Really appreciate that. This has been a fantastic Auto Lab. Let's go around the horn and let people know where they can find out more information about every one of our interesting guests. Joe, once again, thank you so much for being on and sharing your art with us and your unique perspective. How can people learn more? Tell them about your Instagram and maybe one day your Facebook that'll get turned back on.
Good. My wife said you can't complain because it's free because of the lousy service.
I don't know how free it is. They make a lot of money off of us. So
yes.
Without us, they wouldn't have a business. So,
but join me on Instagram. I post pictures of. I like history, and I always give credit where credit's due with other talents, because to me, that's what generates the passion of the automobile. But join me on Instagram, Joe Pep. Every car has a story, and love to say hello. Some people
All right.
think it's like, well, I'm really not in the market to buy art, but I do
Mhm.
have a question. It's like, why not? We're car guys. This is our
Maybe some guy wants to have their car done. Maybe that's like a fantastic gift for somebody, is to
Mhm.
hire Joe to do an illustration of their car, which could be a fun thing to do. So
But it's
definitely reach
fun,
out to Joe Pep.
but
Definitely.
it's rewarding when you do a magazine cover. And that I have to say, it's like, kids today, they want it now. That took me 11 years to get
to get to that point.
to that point. Yeah.
You know what? And we're so glad that you did, because you're a
Thank you.
real treasure in the automotive world. So thank you, Joe, for being part of our show. And I hope you'll come back sometime soon. Mike, how can
I'm here.
people reach you?
You can reach me at 516-488-3225. That's our Gold Shield hotline number. But I have to mention something to Joe. We've talked all the time about how car guys are very helpful to other car guys. And Joe, you mentioned something earlier that was interesting, that Italians, we have the same characteristic, that we can't pass somebody in need without helping them, right?
That's
Well,
right.
Mhm.
the emblem behind me above our Gold Shield, above our Auto Lab logo, is the Gold Shield emblem, which we just heard about in our commercial message. And we are here to save the lives of veterans. So we're basically in the business of trying to help veterans in need. And the reason Gold Shield sponsors this show is they realize that car guys are helping other people, and we want everybody. Car guys have been very helpful about joining Gold Shield and helping our
Mhm.
veterans. So I'll send you more
Nice.
information on Gold Shield,
Please.
and perhaps you'll join us. But I also have a trademark hat
Right.
that
And
you see my trademark hat.
we need another. Joe needs another hat.
Thank you for your, thank you
So
for
when
your
you
service.
see my airborne wings at a car show, you'll know it's me. Fun,
Robert-
That's to be proud
interestingly, yesterday I was searching through my archives and I came across my graduation record from airborne school, which was 51 years ago yesterday. I got those wings.
Wow.
That's great.
Um,
Robert Erskine, how can people find out more about you and your writing and your sculpture? You're muted, Robert. We couldn't go through one auto lab without a muting.
How could I do that? I gave it out and you didn't hear a word.
Go
You
ahead.
can visit me on www.roberterskine.com. And here is something you may find of interest. If you go onto YouTube and look for the Museum of Making, England's
Mhm.
newest design museum, all about design, art, manufacture, and making. Watch the wonderful clip, which is only 3 minutes, and you'll be in for a surprise at the end. You'll see my jet engine, which is on
Oh,
public
that's
exhibition.
cool. And what is the Museum of Making?
The
Is that what you
Museum
called
of
it?
Making. It's in the
Okay.
first museum, it's in the first factory in the world, they say, that was designed to make stuff. And it's all about engineering, design, innovation, manufacturing, making, right up to today,
Right.
encouraging young people to become engineers, designers, and makers. And of course,
I'll have to check it
car
out.
designers. Check it
The
out.
Museum of Making. We'll have to check it out. And please
It's
check
fantastic.
out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Ian Carr with a K, IANKARR. Thank you so much for checking out the Auto Lab this week. And thanks, of course, to our wonderful guest, Joe, and everybody who joined. Please like the page and become a member of our Auto Lab family. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please leave them right here in the chat, and we'll get to them right away. Otherwise,
And-
have a wonderful 4th of July, and we'll see you next week right here on the Auto Lab.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everybody.
And
Thank
everybody
you.
go to
Later.
the goldshield.us and join us.
Robert, happy 4th of July.
And the same to you. Having lots of Hershey bars.